Just an amazing man. It's Mr. David Heavener. David, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Mike, it's so good to be with you. And I want to say hello to everybody in Watchman Land.
Well, thank you. You know, David, folks, is an actor, director, producer, writer, singer, songwriter. At age 17, he took off and went to Nashville, Tennessee, where he started writing songs. And in a very short period of time, he had 2 top 10 hits, and he was writing for shows like Hee Haw, for those of you that remember Hee Haw, and The Tonight Show. He's just truly what do I say? A Renaissance man, a true Renaissance man. But something really interesting that David is doing, David is really working hard to rid Hollywood of the demonic influences by coming out with some new series that we're going to talk about. David, thanks again for joining us. And I wanted to ask you a question, you know, just to get started. How did you get started in all of this?
Well, Mike, it's like you said, I was a songwriter in Nashville, Tennessee, and I was fortunate enough to have a few hit records, but I just felt like it wasn't enough. And I felt like God was calling me out to Hollywood to pitch my songs to get them in movies. And I used to write for a guy named Marty Robbins, and he hooked me up out there with a few people. But I went out there to pitch my songs, and people didn't want to hear my songs, but somebody thought I was an actor. So they put me in a low-budget martial arts movie, which happened to do very well, and that started my career. And so 40-some-odd movies later, here I am.
But you've taken a turn. You were in, correct me if I'm wrong, but for a while you were really in the mainstream Hollywood grip. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I made a lot of movies for HBO, Showtime, and I made, quite frankly, movies that were rated R. You know, I gave them what they wanted, the action and the, you know, all the other stuff that goes with it. And but now I've come into a new, I guess you could say, a new level, a new enlightenment, maybe a new way of thinking, because I do have the mind of Christ, and I'll share that with you.
Well, you know, David, I mean, it's interesting because you don't meet many people like you that are willing to put it all on the line to make a movie or a series and not be influenced by everything that Hollywood does to influence actors and directors and writers. What happened to you that made you take that leap of faith?
Well, you know, when I first got into Hollywood, I noticed it was a system, and it was a rigged system that only a few people could make it. And if you thought a certain way and you said certain things, you were pretty much locked out. And so I went outside of the system making independent films, which did very well. As a matter of fact, they did so well that HBO came to me and signed a contract and wanted me to do movie after movie for them. And I always played a character who lived outside of the system. It's a character that was more like a vigilante, if you will, who didn't adhere to the rules and regulations, especially when those rules and regulations were twisted and bent toward a system that was already bent and broken. So I realized that if I was going to make it, I had to go around the system. And so this brings me to what I'm doing now. Since I've always played the guy that never lived by the rules, I guess maybe that might be why God has chosen me to make a TV series that breaks all the rules.
Well, and we're going to talk about that. You're going to be at the Hear the Watchman conference, March 22nd through the 25th. It's coming right up, folks. You can still get a ticket. Go to hearthewatchmen.com. David's going to be an exhibitor there. You can come out and meet him, and you can find out one-on-one about his new series, The Last Evangelist. Now, talk to us about that, David. What led you to do The Lost Evangelist? And I know what it's about, but tell us, you know, for the other listeners, kind of give us a synopsis of what it's about and what led you to do this project.
Sure, Mike. through my years of making movies, I always was a music minister. I always did go to church on Sunday. I had my spiritual man that I put on. But that's the problem. I had my spiritual clothes I put on Sunday, but then I had my movie clothes I put on the rest of the week. And I noticed that there were two systems. One was the Hollywood system, which may make movies about God every once in a while, but it's certainly not going to tell you the truth. Then there was this other system that was being created. It was called the Christian faith-based movie system, which is a very corrupt system because it's a feel-good system. There are good movies in it, but unfortunately, the good doesn't outweigh the bad. And so I realized that the Christian film industry was just preaching to the choir, if they were preaching at all. And the Hollywood system wasn't going to tell you the truth. And so God laid it on my heart, David, just make a regular series that about real people dealing with what's happening today. And I'm in the, God speaking, God says, and put me in the middle of it. Make me the norm instead of the abnormal. And I said, wow, God, that makes perfect sense. Thank you. And so this series is about, I play a cop in modern day time, and the churches now are registered or unregistered by the government, one world government. And if you're not registered, they bring me in to come in and bust an unregistered church, an underground church, if you will. And so I go from place to place, arresting these people and persecuting them, such as like a modern day Saul. And until I meet God one night in my apartment, and he says, he basically puts me to work for him. So with a Bible in one hand and a gun in the other, I set out to deal with the current events of today, which is the cashless society, the Antichrist, the mark of the beast. I mean, it goes on, Mike. We can make this series for the rest of our lives and never run out of themes.
Wow, what an interesting plot line there. I mean, it's fascinating, you know, because like you said, you're trying to bring God back into it, and I think we've lost that. You just said, you know, God, the Bible in one hand and a gun in the other. You know, let's face it, if that had been in the Florida school recently, maybe we wouldn't have had the tragedy that we had there. But what is the resistance of Hollywood to have God in the movies? I mean, what are they afraid of?
Well, basically, it's a system. And I don't like to talk about people. I like to talk about systems because people are in the system. The system, which people are in, they do not want the truth because the system is owned by Satan. The enemy owns that system and does not want the truth to be out. Now, you mentioned the shootings in the school. Here's the system. That system says we need to take guns out of the hands of people so the shooting doesn't happen. God says you need to put me back in school. If you put me back in the school, you will not have these issues. You see, the problem is not guns in the hands of people. It's taken Bibles out of the hands of people. And so Hollywood does not want the truth to be exposed. You can do feel-good movies, you can twist God, you can just, and maybe don't even talk about God, but don't tell the truth. Well, unfortunately, they're in for a rude awakening because God willing, I'm going to tell the truth.